Thank you very much, Nasser, for having me. And I want to join the wall in congratulating us for surviving this pandemic. We sincerely hope that GasTech 2021 in Dubai will be a turning point in this recovery year of 2021 going forward. To come back to your question, which is a very, very important question, this transition is gathering momentum, is gathering steam, especially with the recovery from the pandemic in 2021 going forward. In the medium to long term, as postulated in our forthcoming World Oil Outlook that will be launched shortly, we project that growth of demand of energy will be in the region of 25% to 28%, 28% to 2045. We also project that growth for oil demand will be in the region of 25 million barrels between now and 2045. We are also postulating that oil and gas cumulatively will account for over 50% of the global energy mix between now and 2045. The global economy, as it is today, will double by 2045 in size. And in terms of population, we see population growth in the region of 20%. Nearly 90% will be coming from the developing countries. Now, the current crunch in energy prices, in particular gas prices, that you made reference to, is a function of several factors, but chief of which is what I term the transition premium. This transition is coming with its own challenges. We have seen deliberate attempt to crowd out investments in the hydrocarbon sector on the grounds of climate and climate goals that are not found in the science or in the facts. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, which is supposed to be the most authoritative source or body that should guide this transition, in our opinion, in OPEC, is doing a great job. We follow very closely their work. Their reports are impeccable. They are based on science and facts. But unfortunately, in this conversation, their findings are being set aside. And the narrative is being driven more by emotions than by the science and the facts. Therefore, we need to go back to the mainstream. In the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow this year, the world needs to go back to the provisions of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, because it is based on those provisions that the Paris Agreement itself was reached in Paris. And since the world is now gravitating back to the implementation of the Paris Agreement, there is need for us to go back to the basis, because it is the most comprehensive, it is the most inclusive, fair, based on principles that were debated and negotiated by the global community, chief, which is the core principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respected capabilities of parties. We in OPEC believe that this industry has a role to play in the solution not only to climate change but also to energy poverty. 80% of global reserves of oil reside in OPEC member countries. The challenge we face is the challenge of how to address greenhouse gas emissions. It is not a challenge of how to keep these below ground resources as stranded assets, because going to 2045 in our projection, both oil and gas will account for over 50%, and the growth in demand will be about 25 million cumulatively. Energy in total, 28% growth. There is no replacement for any one single source of energy. The world will need all sources of energy, including renewables. But in the utilization, in the production, extraction, utilization of these energy resources, we have to deploy technology to be able to address these emissions. Climate change is a function of historic emissions. And going forward in a sustainable manner, the world needs to address these emissions using technology. We reject the narrative that the energy transition is a transition from one source of energy to another. It is a transition that is based on sustainability and the combat of these emissions that is beclouding climate and is affecting the environment. And we from developing countries, we are more affected by the impact of climate change than any part of the world. We live it every day. In terms of energy poverty, the numbers speak for themselves. The 800 million people that have no access to electricity, according to the IEA, 600 are from sub-Saharan Africa. 600 million. Out of the nearly 2.6 billion people, according to the IEA, that have no access to clean cooking fuels, 900 million come from sub-Saharan Africa. What do we tell these people? The United Nations has answered that. The United Nations, for the first time, resolved in SDG 7, Sustainable Development Goal number 7, that access to affordable and sustainable modern energy sources is not a privilege. It is a right, that these people also have a right. Therefore, we need an all-inclusive and comprehensive solution. And until the world pause and take stock from where we are coming from and what the facts are, according to the IPCC, according to the IEA, according to OPEC and other reputable sources, and come back to the mainstream based on the provisions of the UNFCCC, which is the foundation of Paris itself, then this conversation would be incomplete. And we want an all-inclusive transition. We want the conversation to involve all stakeholders, and it should not be driven by emotions, but by science and facts.